Shri Krishna tells Arjuna, "Nor do these works bind me, O winner of wealth, for I am seated as if indifferent, unattached in those actions." Shri Krishna addresses Arjuna as Dhanamjaya. What does this mean? It means winner of wealth. You must understand the meaning of this word. What is Dhanamjaya? That which gives you nourishment is dhan, wealth. Dati iti dhanam. And one who wins this dhan, wealth, is Dhanamjaya, a winner of wealth. Dhanamjayati sanyatam dhanamjaya. We say in common language that if a person has money, and that money gives a person nourishment and support in case anything happens. There are two reasons why Shri Krishna addresses Arjuna as Dhanamjaya, winner of wealth. The first is that there is a story in the Mahabharata that Arjuna has gone out to achieve victory in all directions, and when he came back from achieving victory in all directions, he brought back a lot of material wealth. Because of this, Arjuna got the name Dhanamjaya, winner of wealth. If I were to write it in context of the Gita, then this is Arjuna has sat next to Shri Krishna and has surrendered to Shri Krishna's feet as Shri Krishna's pupil, so that Shri Krishna can tell him what is right for him. When Arjuna made this request to Shri Krishna, then Arjuna attained the wealth of knowledge, of wisdom. Arjuna was named Dhanamjaya, winner of wealth, after achieving victory in all directions, and in the Gita, Arjuna sat by the Supreme Soul and attained the wealth of wisdom, and that is why Arjuna is addressed as Dhanamjaya, winner of wealth. Shri Krishna gives two reasons in this verse why these works do not bind him. The first is because he is unattached in his actions, and the second is because he is seated as if indifferent. The Supreme Soul tells Arjuna that he creates the whole world, maintains the whole world, and destroys the whole world, but the Supreme Soul has no wish for the fruits of this. Think about why God is doing all of this. We get married so that we can have progeny and material happiness. We get married and have children. Then those children get older and look after the business. The children look after the parents. These parents have one expectation or the other. God creates so much, but has God got any expectations? No. First of all, God is unattached to the fruits of his actions. Then why did God create this world? This world is God's divine game. Lokavatu lila ke lavyam. There is a difference between an action and a game. When there is a feeling of being a doer, then it is called an action. And when there is no feeling of being a doer, then it is called a game. When there were theatre plays in the olden days, then if there was a play of Ram, then it would be called Ram Leela, Ram Divine Game. Why is it Ram's Leela? Ram's Divine Game? This is because Lord Sri Ramchandra had his game, but when this actor of Ram breaks the bow of Shiva, as in the Ramayana, then the actor does not get egotism for breaking the bow of Shiva, and the actor cannot possibly have this egotism. The actor knows that the screw in the bow is loose, and when the drum bangs loudly, the bow breaks. The actor does not have this attitude that I broke the bow of Shiva, and therefore it is Ram Leela, Ram's divine game. It is the same with Krishna Leela, Krishna's divine game. Once egotism comes in the actor's mind, then the game stops happening. This happened once. A play of Ram Leela, Ram's divine game, was going on, and what happened was that when they do different shows in different towns, an actor was playing the part of Ravan in his own town of Sasru. The actor playing part of Ravan performed his part well for 1 or 2 days, and people praised his acting in the scene when Ravan kidnapped Sita. And on the 8th day, when Ravan would not accept the truth, the people in the town of Sasru praised the actor for his performance of someone with egotism. Then on the last day when Ravan was going to die at the hands of Ram, after the people of Sasru had praised the actor playing the part of Ravan was stirred up, and when the war between Ram and Ravan was played up in Lanka, when Ram went to attack Ravan, Ravan would not die. He was asked why, and he said that it was because the people of his hometown of Sasru were sitting in the audience, and a person cannot die on stage in his hometown. He said that it was a question of his reputation. The funny thing was that the actor playing the part of Ram was very skinny, because that is the kind of actor they give the role to. The villain has to look strong and mighty. The skinny 5'5" actor playing the part of Ram was up against the 6'5" actor playing the part of Ravan. As soon as the actor playing the part of Ravan would strike Ravan with an arrow, then people would praise the strength of Ram. If the person playing the part of Ram was 7 foot and the person playing of Ravan was 5 foot, then there would be magic in this. If people like magic, it was decided that after an arrow would be fired, then the actor playing the part of Ravan would fall to the ground. The person playing the part of Ravan said that he would not fall into the floor because it was his hometown of Sasru. This egotism came into the actor playing the part of Ravan, and when this egotism came, then what happens is that the people nearby were shouting, "Die Ravan! Die Ravan!" And even the actor playing the part of Ram said, "Die Ravan!" But the actor playing the part of Ravan would not die. In the end, they pulled down the curtains, 4 people took Ravan inside, and they opened the door and said, "Now Ravan is dead." This is the difficulty when one gets egotism. While the egotism is not there, then the game continues to be played, but when the egotism comes, then it becomes an action. When it becomes an action, then bondages start to happen, and 4 people drag one away. But what about when the game continues to be played? Do you ever see in Sri Krishna's life that 4 people came and took him away? No. Do you ever see in Sri Ram's life that 4 people came and took him away? No. This is because Sri Krishna's and Sri Ram's lives were games, but all of us perform actions, and therefore in the end, 4 people take us away, pull down the curtain, and say to light incense sticks. This is because we are not prepared to go ourselves, and therefore 4 people have to take us away. This is the difference between a game and an action. The Supreme Soul is completely unattached from all of this, and does not wish for fruits. The Supreme Soul has no egotism, and no feeling of being a doer. The Supreme Soul is also seated as if indifferent. A person can only be indifferent if all the person's karmas are performed without any attitude of being the performer and a powerful one all by oneself. Shri Krishna says in the next verse that under his guidance, nature gives birth to all things. A person who is indifferent does not have to do anything herself. Such a person is just sitting there and the karmas continue to happen. Only such a person has bliss in life. Shri Krishna says that he just remains seated. When creatures are born or when the world is born, then the Supreme Soul says that he does not become delighted, and when the world is destroyed, then the Supreme Soul does not get any sorrows. That is why the Supreme Soul is indifferent. Human beings are different in all these matters because they become happy whenever they get something and become unhappy whenever they lose something. When a flower blooms on a balcony, then we begin dancing and saying that the rose is blooming, the rose is blooming. But when the flower dies, then we get sad and we think about when a rose will come again. God has created such a great world, and when the world is destroyed, then God is completely unattached. We must understand the meaning of the word udasin, used in this verse, thus literally meaning seated as in indifferent, said by Shri Krishna in this verse. It is split into ut, meaning above, and asina, meaning seated. Shri Krishna is seated above. Only a person who is seated above gets peace. The more you begin to go upwards in life, then the more peace you'll get in life, and the more bliss you'll get in life. When there is a sea storm taking place, and if a person is sitting in a boat in the middle of the sea storm, the boat will go up and down all the time, and the person will have a lot of tension. But if someone is going on a helicopter above the same sea storm, and looks below, then he will enjoy the big waves rising above the water. He will be fascinated by the massive waves. The person who is in the water sees the waves as a threat, but the person sitting in a helicopter sees the waves as entertainment. This is because the person sitting in a helicopter is seated above the water. There is an example that I like a lot, and I say a lot during my discourses. There was a valley next to a mountain, and many people made their houses in the valley. When monsoon season came, then the rain would fall onto the mountain and would then fall from the edge of the mountain to the valley with so much force that the homes of these people would get flooded and drowned. The children would get drowned and crops that grown in the farms would get destroyed. There was so much damage and all the people would run around everywhere. This would continue to happen. One time a guest came into the town. He stayed one night during the monsoon season, and that night very heavy rain fell and the guest saw all the running around and people crying for help. People could grab whatever came into their hands in order to save themselves, and this would go on for the entire night. In the morning, this guest got together everybody in the town and asked them why they were living under such difficulties. The people told him that there was nothing they could do about it, and that there was no escape from the fact that they lived in the valley and a lot of water would come from above, and that there was nothing they could do about it. They said that this would happen all the time during monsoon season, and then they accepted that this was a part and parcel of their lives. The guest told them that he had a solution to this if they would listen to him. The people asked him what it was. The guest told them that instead of building houses in the valley below the mountain, they should build their houses in the valley above the mountain. The guest told them that if they built their houses on top of the mountain, then the rain would come, but the rain that was giving their miseries at the moment would now give them happiness. The children would begin dancing in the rain, and this rain would help the crops in their farms to grow. The rain that was until now giving them sorrows would then begin to give them happiness in their lives. The guest advised them to live at the top of the mountain. A person should elevate herself. Shri Krishna says in this verse that he is seated above as in indifferent. The more you elevate yourself in life, then the more peace you'll get in life. This is the case in any field of life. In financial terms, the further below that a person is, then the more difficulties that the person will get, and the more that the person elevates herself, then the more peace that the person will have in her life. In the field of education, the further below that the student is, then the more difficulties that the student will get, and the more that the student elevates herself, then the more peace that the student will get. Even in the field of religion, the field of spirituality, or in any other field, the further below you are, then the more difficulties you will have, And the further above you go, then the more peace you have. You should elevate yourself. God says that He is seated above as indifferent, and therefore God does not have any problems. I like this famous bhajan, divine song of Narsi Mehta a lot. Uche meri te mara sant nire. My saints live in the upper story. I kept thinking about why he was saying Uchi Medi, because this is a sign of prosperity. If he was talking about a businessman in the town, then we can understand him saying Uchi Medi, but he was talking about saints and gurus. Yes, this is who he was talking about, because saints and gurus have this elevation. The higher the perspective from which one sees the world, then the less worries that person will have. When a person lives in the material world, then all her small problems look so big, but when the person goes and sits in front of a saint or a guru, then her perspective of looking at life changes completely. Saints and gurus make our problems so small. It is not as if saints have occupied the elevated story. What Narsi Mehta means to say is that a person who has elevated themselves to a higher story is a saint. When a person's perspective of looking at life changes, and the person has an elevated view, then that person becomes a saint. Shri Krishna says here in this verse that he is seated as if indifferent. How high above is God seated? Guru Shatratuk says that God is seated 10 fingers above. Om Sasa Shisha Prutta Sasra Spata Somigut Tavastruta Kyasita Dushan Patishta Dashan Gulan. This does not mean literally 10 fingers, but above the 10 senses. One who is above the 10 senses is God. God is above the state of the motion and intelligence of the senses, and God is above the reach of the senses. Because God is seated so high above, works do not bind him. The works he is talking about are the works described in the verse 8, namely taking hold of nature and sending forth beings again and again. The action of creation of hosts of beings does not bind God. Ramanujacharya says that Tani Visham Shushtani Karmani. He says that actions of unequal creation do not bind God. Creation are equal because one person is unequal because one person is made rich and another person is made poor. Is this not inequality? One person is made beautiful and another person does not get so much beauty. Is this not inequality? Even though God has created an unequal world, this does not bind God because God is unattached and seated above as in indifferent. Shri Krishna also says the word nibadhanti, meaning that works certainly do not bind him. Nishchaya na badanti iti nibadhanti. The Lord is not bound by these works. The reason for this is that God does not have any wish for the fruits of karmas. Human beings are attached to the fruits of karmas, and that is why karmas bind human beings. Thinking about the subject a little, karmas are destroyable, and therefore should one have bondage towards that which is destroyable? No, but these bondages arise because human beings wish to have the fruits of these karmas. If we try to look at it logically, then even the fruits are destroyable. Karmas are destroyable and fruits are also destroyable. Yet look at the oddity. The bondages that arise towards the fruits of actions do not get destroyed. This is a great wonder of this world. If I were to say this from a different perspective, then people get destroyed and objects get destroyed, but the bondages that arise to these people and objects do not get destroyed. If we tie a relation with a person, then if this person leaves us, then that relation does not break, that relation stays there forever. If a person creates bondages with an object, then that object can get destroyed, but the bondages will stay. People, objects, events and circumstances, karmas and fruits are destroyable, but the relations that are created with them do not get destroyed. This is because we create a sense of minus with these relations, and as a result, the dualities of pleasures and pains are born. God says that He has no egotism and a sense of minus of being the creator, maintainer or destroyer of the world, and that is why no bondages arise of Him. The bondage of being the doer is the biggest bondage of all. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya says it very beautifully that karmas are destroyable and fruits are destroyable, but what human beings do is that they create so many relations with people and objects around them that they become like silkworms. Ataha anyasapi katut faram pravata valaskam sadha asam bhaktanam anta karmabi padyate murata kosha karvadat itya vipraha. Silkworms tie themselves and nobody else comes and ties silkworms. Silkworms create a sense of minus with the material around them and become stuck in that material. In the same way, the bondages that we create in the material world are created by ourselves just in the same way as these silkworms. God has no interest in binding us, and nobody else has any interest in binding us. We create these bondages ourselves. We may then ask that if God has no bondages, then how does our nature run? We have wishes, and that is why we run our lives, but God has no wishes. If God has no bondages, is unattached, and is seated above as indifferent, then how does this world still work? Shri Krishna explains the answer in the next verse.